All right, Joel Gausten here from joelgausten.com. For this conversation, I'm delighted to be joined by someone I haven't seen for a couple of years, and we've been trying to connect for a bit. So it's my great pleasure to welcome from the beautiful West Coast, Mr. Tom Wallace. Tom, welcome. Great to see you.
Good to see you too. How you been?
I've been okay. I've been okay. Very hot here. I'm up in New Hampshire, and we have some fairly brutal summers. You know, it's not the humidity less California environment. It's the sweltering, swampy version. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I've been in the Northeast a few times to the in the summer, and I've experienced that.
yeah, yeah, that's one thing I miss about living in California is you don't really have that humidity. It can be 100+ degrees, and it's fairly comfortable, but out here, anything above 80, you're kind of swimming in air, so.
Yeah.
But we have much to talk about, my friend. To give a brief introduction to those who are watching this who may not be familiar with Tom, Tom is a drummer who's been a part of some very interesting things that we'll be diving into. Tom and I first met in 2018 in Los Angeles for Mr. Bill Ward's book reading when he put out his art book and poetry book. And we crossed paths. Actually, we were seated right next to each other for that event. And what I'll do is in the video description, I'll post a link to my feature on that book reading event because you were very kind enough, Tom, to let me use one of your photos of Bill for
Oh,
that feature. So that's how you and I met, and we've been in touch ever since. And you had told me about some musical endeavors you were involved in, and taking me a bit of time to kind of catch up with you. But I guess we should say too, before diving into much else, behind you is one of Bill's art pieces. So that's again, that's our connection. We met kind of through the Bill Ward art thing, and we'll get into that as well. Um, but starting with drumming, um, when and how did playing drums first become part of your life?
so I never wanted to play drums. I wanted to play guitar, and I got a guitar at a fairly young age, probably like junior high school or something like that, and uh, just never really had the aptitude for it, and it was seemed so confusing. Looking at open tuning EADGBE, I always thought that was so weird. Why not ABCDEF? What? It doesn't make any sense to me. And so my mind just didn't work that way. And I'd been listening to music all my life, loved it. Uh, and one day, probably 3 or 4 years later, I was tapping my fingers to again a Black Sabbath song. And a friend of mine who played bass in a band said, "Tom, you've had a guitar and an amp for 4 years and you can't play one damn song." And he said, "And you tapped right along with that song, with the drums in that song. You should try drums if you really want to be in a band." And I thought, oh, okay, that can be my entree into music. I'll get into a band playing drums, and then in due time I'll learn guitar and actually be a guitarist. And well, that learning guitar never really happened. Uh, Drums just kept. I just kept. They were like natural for me, and I just kept learning and learning it at a fairly easy pace. Of course, at a certain level, it becomes much more difficult. It's not just like keeping a basic beat or anything. Um, but so that's how I got into drums, and I was probably, I don't know, maybe like 14 or 15 or something when that happened. And within 6 months I joined that guy's band. I was the drummer in that band.
Hmm.
So to show how natural it came to me, we were playing fairly easy cover tunes, but that's how it began.
Fantastic. Um, and how active were you as the years went on? Were you doing band session work, things along those lines? Was it a regular activity for you?
I mainly quickly focused on original music. I didn't want to spend a lot of time playing other people's stuff and being like the local backyard party high school band kind of thing. Uh, I enjoyed that. I helped friends set up their gear when they wanted to do that sort of stuff. I would participate, but that's not where I wanted to go musically. So I would put together bands, with other schoolmates, and then after school, in my 20s and stuff, It's always focused on original music and going into the local clubs, opening for national acts and that sort of thing. And then
Mhm.
started recording as soon as I was in an outfit where I thought we were good enough to do that.
Now, was this generally along the lines of hard rock and metal, or were there other genres involved?
Hard rock to metal to progressive rock. If you like, I grew up listening to my three favorite bands were Alice Cooper, Black Sabbath, and Yes. So hard rock, metal, and progressive rock, and you throw all that stuff together, and you'll hear that in any band I've ever been in.
Absolutely, which kind of fast forwards things to Guild of Others. I
Mhm.
wanted to really dive into that. That is your current project, which you've had for a bit now, and it definitely combines all those styles together quite beautifully, actually. Um, and Guild of Others is yourself and a guitarist named Steve Potts.
Right.
You two are the primary members. How did you and Steve connect and begin the process of making music together?
So Steve was in a band that needed a drummer, and I met with them and got a sample disc, 4 songs, and then went to a rehearsal with them a couple nights later, and we went over those songs and ended up joining that band. And we came up with the name Symbolic. And so I was with Symbolic and with Steve for about 4 or 5 years, something like that. And then we parted ways. Symbolic kept going, and I started doing other stuff with another band. And then um, somehow I got in touch with Tony Martin, again, another Black Sabbath link. And he and I emailed each other a couple times. And I said that I was thinking about putting together a project. And would he be willing, if he does session work, because he wasn't with Sabbath at that time, it was well after that, would he be willing to maybe contribute vocals if I, sent him some of the material, and he said, yeah, when you're ready, send it to me. And the first thing I thought of when I thought, who do I know that writes killer Sabbath style licks? And that would be Steve. And Steve is so prolific that he could always be in one band and another band and contributing to another band, and it never slows him down. And he has just a vast multitude of ideas all the time. So I ran into he and his wife at a Winery Dogs concert in LA, and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this thing, and would you want to participate in the writing process? And what we'll do, the reason it's called Guild of Others, it would be myself and Steve, and then always bringing in other musicians. So
Mhm.
for the first album, we ended up not using had Tony Martin wasn't available when the time came, so he's not on the first album. We'll see if he ends up being on the second one or not. We don't know, but so the idea was the first album we would reach out to different people that we thought would be a good fit, send them tracks, and those who were available would contribute. We'd finish the album and release it, and then and do it again when the time came. And so that's where we are now. When the process actually we've recorded two 25-minute songs,
Wow.
uh, yeah, and four regular length songs, like 5 or 6 minutes. And we're going back up in a couple more weeks and recording 6 more regular, average length songs. And then, so the drums and guitars will be done with all that stuff fairly soon. And we'll do the same process. We'll reach out to different vocalists and bassists and keyboardists and that sort of thing, and complete that project or that album just the same way.
Now, it's interesting. You mentioned a couple of names there I wanted to get into. And you and I both know how incredibly small the music world is.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
as just one example, randomly sitting next to you at Bill's book reading and starting to chat, that led to you connecting me with Michael Bruce from the Alice
All
Cooper group,
right.
so everything kind of leads to one, to the next thing. But you mentioned Tony Franklin, who's obviously an extraordinary bass player. Um, you also had Craig Goldy on the album.
Yeah.
Michael's on the album as well, Michael Bruce. Derek Sherinian is on there
Mhm.
as well. Um, these are wish list level musicians for a lot of players. Um, how was it possible to sort of connect the dots and get all these different players involved?
So Tony and Derek are on the entire album. Craig and Michael Bruce and Michael Sadler and Michael Bruce's wife, Lynn, and other people are on. They're on some songs, not all the songs. The two that are on the entire album are Tony and Derek.
Mhm.
Um, Derek, I had met a number of times, whether from way back in his Dream Theater days and on subsequent tours, and then I think it was on one of the Yes Cruise to the Edge cruises that
Mm.
I had mentioned to him. Uh, that I was working on the Skilled of Others project, and we were looking for a keyboard player. I'd always loved his work with Dream Theater as far as his choice of synth sounds. I didn't pay that much attention to his Hammond kind of organ V3 work until Black Country Communion. And people of course always go to John Lord and other great deserving players when they think of that kind of V3 organ stuff. But I was really impressed with the way Derek applied that. And so I asked him if he would be curious to hear any of the demos when they were ready, and would he be available. And he said the same thing that everyone says. It's generally, yeah, when they're ready, send them to me. There can never really be a guarantee, because if they don't feel it's a good fit, then they may not want to participate, and that's just the way that goes. But Derek liked it, and I first thought about him on a couple of songs, and then I just as we were talking, I just said, "Well, you want to just do the whole album?" And he said, "Sure." And so that's the way that came about.
Excellent, excellent. And you mentioned Michael Sadler from Saga
Mhm.
is on there as well. Um, and you have, I guess, more local people as well participating on the first album.
Yeah, we had the singer who Mark Hammond, who's a great vocalist. I met him through my niece Melissa. He and her went to high school together, and Melissa's mother was always telling me, "You have to," she knew I was into music. She said, "You have to meet my daughter's friend Mark. He's so great." And I thought, okay, someday I hope that happens. You never really know. It's a lot of this is always, or it just tends to be talk, and nothing ever comes of it. And somehow I saw something he posted on Facebook, maybe because, like, how Facebook and algorithms work. Probably we had mutual friends, and it crossed my feed. Who knows? And I thought, wow, he is actually pretty good, and I'm pretty sure that's what led me to reach out to him. And so he's on 6 of the 8 songs. Michael Sadler is on one, and Henrik Bath from Darkwater is on the other.
Mm, excellent. And I was really excited to see Craig Goldy,
Mhm.
have a moment with the album as well. I interviewed him a few years back. Very nice guy, obviously an amazing player, very
Yeah.
underrated player, I would say, in the hard rock genre. I mean, his work is always top notch. Um, not often said in the same breath as the greats, but perhaps should be,
Mhm.
in many ways. So it's a fascinating collection of people. And like I said, Tony Franklin, um, one of the greatest bass players on earth, is on your album, which is
Mhm.
extraordinary. So it sounds to me it really was a result of all those beautiful small world encounters that we
Yeah.
are fortunate enough to enjoy as we do what we do.
Yeah, yeah. Tony's the meeting with him was because I used to write for magazines. Had a music column for many years in a number of different publications, and I would photograph bands and do reviews or previews or whatever. And so I had photographed Tony in a couple different settings, and met him one day for coffee to give him some copies of the photos, because he lives probably like 30 miles from me. And so we were talking, and that's what led to me asking him if he wanted to be on the album, because 2 of the songs we really wanted fretless bass on. We thought those songs really called for fretless bass. So we reached out to him, and he said yeah, and we got those 2 songs back, and I was just so floored by his tone and his application, that his fit was so perfect, that the other people we were thinking of reaching out to, or even some we had already reached out to, we just said, no, let's draw it back and just ask Tony if he'll do the whole thing, because it was such a perfect fit. And it worked out well because between Steve, Derek, Tony, and myself, that is a great core sound. The album really developed its own personality there. And then bringing in the vocalists and Craig and different people, that added some great flourishes all across the top. But the core sound was already created with Derek and Tony involved.
Fantastic. And we should mention this is all featured on the as of this date, Soul Guild of Others album, the eponymous debut album from 2021, was it? There.
I think it was officially released in February of 22.
Okay.
Yeah,
And that was through Louder Than Loud Records out in Germany, correct?
right. Yeah. Giles. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent. Um, I've been listening to the album quite a bit leading up to this conversation. First of all, I love it. You
Thanks.
are as a drummer to drummer, you're a fantastic player. It's a joy listening to your work, truly.
Thank you.
Um, I'm a prog fan. I'll say that up front, and I like what I would call crazy prog. A thousand notes in a measure prog.
Mhm.
Um, but as much as I love that, it can also get a little tiring after a bit. Obviously, if people play prog, they know how to play. In my view, they don't necessarily have to prove it every 10 seconds, but
Right.
there's a lot of prog music that kind of goes off the deep end. What I love about your album is there are certainly enough prog elements to it, but there's an accessibility overall as well that I think a
Mhm.
lot of prog releases don't have. It's a bit more of a straight line in most places. So it's prog. It'll appeal to the prog fans, but I think your more casual hard rock or metal listener would dig it as well. So anyone watching this video who's a fan of any of the musicians we just mentioned, I will have a link in the video description for information on how to purchase the album. I highly recommend you do so. Um, it's hard to pick a favorite track on the album, but if I had to pull one out of thin air to really kind of get your perspectives on in terms of songwriting, that would have to be Memento, which
Oh,
is
interesting.
a
Cool.
gorgeous track.
Yeah.
So and I would recommend anybody, if you want to sample a song, track that one down first. That's my personal favorite. Um, yeah, I would say that's my favorite. If I had to pick one, it would be that one. So what can you tell me about the process behind that particular track and getting those different musical pieces to fit as well as it did?
Yeah, if you're coming from more of a prog sense, like you say, none of them are way out there,
Mhm.
but you get the feel of prog in Memento, and wouldn't have been surprised if you had chosen Balance either. That one's fairly proggy in some moments. Um, so Memento, let's see, Steve wrote that one. And then Steve writes in a way that he has the melody and everything. He comes over and he'll give me the parts and we'll work on the parts, but he's already pretty much crafted the melody and then has worked on the lyrics and stuff in his head. So sometimes he'll convey that to me as well. And so that allows the approach, my drum writing approach. Because on other songs, all I really have to go by is more like the construction of the song as opposed to melody and stuff on top. So I'll intentionally write a little more basic to allow room for other things to happen. That's why some of these things have a more straightforward approach. So again, with Memento, it was just he had some bits and came over and played them for me, and then probably on another night came over with some more parts, and then we pieced it all together. Um, One of the cool things about it, though, what I'll tell you definitely is when we were working with Derek on that, there were two patches in songs, the two sort of ragtime piano moments. You know what I'm talking about, if you remember in the song.
Mm.
And those two moments we had left fairly open for Derek to solo on. And in my mind, I was picturing him doing like some wild synth stuff. And we got everything back, and he had just sort of done some nice sort of almost Elton John kind of chords over there, and it was still left wide open. And we said, hey, we really left those open for you. And I guess maybe he thought he was leaving them more open for Steve to do guitar solos or something. I don't remember exactly what his response was. But Steve and I were up at his studio with him, and he listened to it a couple of times and he goes, I've got an idea. And he immediately, put on his electric piano and just started going at it. And that was like a complete 90-degree turn from where I thought that song would have gone. And now when I think of absolute favorite moments on the entire album, those two piano moments are right up there at the top, because I just love it every time that song comes on and I hear those moments. It's beautiful. And it really helps in the sense of prog, because it's unexpected, and prog is quite often unexpected.
Right, right. Yeah, it certainly can be. And Michael Bruce is on that track as well. Uh,
Yeah, and his wife Lynn. Yeah, those are the two overdub voices.
yeah, yeah. And Michael's a great guy, of course. And you've had quite a history with him
Mhm.
in general beyond Guild of Others. How did that connection first come about?
Um, Michael and Lynn and I met at when the original guys all got together with Alice in Nashville. I think it was 2017 or something like that. And we just kind of hit it off and exchanged numbers. And I was going out there for some reason and to Arizona, and we had dinner. And then they were wanting to come out here for NAM, and I kind of set them up with NAM, and things just kind of evolved from there. And but their participation on the album was a very Alice Cooper related thing, because or the band Alice Cooper, um, if you remember the song "Dead Babies," it has that line that talks about little Betty ate a pound of aspirin. She got them from the shelf upon the wall. Well, there's a line in Memento where it says, "When you open your eyes, your life, or no, when you wake up, your life will have just begun," or something like that. And for some reason, that when you wake up, my mind immediately conjured the image of like a baby in a carriage waking up and doting parents standing over the top thinking of how wonderful the life is going to be for this child. And of course, then because I'm sick and grew up listening to Alice Cooper, I immediately, when I thought babies, I thought, oh, dead babies. I know, I'll call Michael. And I wrote this little script out for him. And if you hear, they make little references to little Betty, and Michael says, "Oh, I better hide the aspirin," and all this sort of stuff. That's what's on our song. So not only is there that little Easter egg reference to dead babies in there, but it's one of the guys who actually wrote the song saying it.
Right,
So that was
right.
a fun little connection for me.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
And they were kind enough to do it. We were actually at a rehearsal, and Michael and Lynn had come out. They were out here at Steve's house, and we just did it on my phone. I said, "Hey, here, you guys read these lines into my phone, and we're going to put them on the album if you don't mind." And they did it. They were happy to do it. We were really grateful.
Fantastic. Speaking of phones and Michael Bruce, somewhere on this phone um, is an audio recording of Michael playing Mr. and Misdemeanor off of Easy Action
Oh, cool.
on piano because when I interviewed him a few years back, and by the way, that interview um, will be part of something I'm working on someday. It became part of something else, but I have it still. And he was talking to me over the phone, but he was in front of the piano.
Mm-hmm.
So as we were talking, if a certain song came up, he would kind of like, you know, tickle the ivories and start playing it. And we were talking, I guess the early Alice came up and he was talking about Easy Action and he broke into that song. And
Nice.
I'm like, somewhere on this phone in my video files, I've got it because I was doing it over a landline, but I heard him playing, so I grabbed it just to have an extra backup. So I had it on my camera.
Cool.
Or on my phone rather. So yeah, cool guy, cool guy. And again, the album is such with all the different musicians you have, there's such a cohesion behind it, which I think is very impressive. The way it all kind of comes together as a cohesive unit. It doesn't sound like disparate musicians doing something. Sometimes that's a risk when you have a project. You bring in eight different people and it kind of sounds like eight planes leaving eight different runways. But
Right.
this sounds like a band. This sounds like Guild of Others. It sounds like a
Cool.
very cohesive band, which begs the question, has this or will it ever be a live opportunity for the group?
Yeah, we're asked that a lot, and we would love the opportunity. Um, Probably the way something like that would happen, I don't know if we'd ever be able to have all the original players together because of everyone's different schedules. But maybe like on one of the prog rock cruises or something like that, if a few of them happen to be on that same cruise, and then Steve and I would just say, okay, we'll go. Maybe we can play instead of one of the main stages, a lounge or something like that. And anyone who's been on those cruises knows how that works out. So that's one possibility. The others would be, maybe like a Southern California regional thing. If, maybe Derek and or Tony were here and we could get everyone together. We'd have to find a vocalist who could do it all. Maybe Mark would be available. It's possible. We haven't spent a whole lot of time working on it just because of everyone's schedules.
Right, right. Yeah, definitely makes sense. Makes sense. Um, Personally speaking, I think the music deserves to be done live if the
Mm.
opportunity ever presents itself,
And
It,
some of it wouldn't be that difficult, even if we just chose some of the more straight ahead songs, like what you talked about. You can get maybe a guest or two to fill in the spot. My concern would be anyone who knew the album and knew all the names on it. If they were coming expecting to see all those names and maybe we couldn't provide them, I wouldn't want anyone walking away feeling like they didn't get what they paid for.
right, right. Yeah, that's understandable. But in terms of live and touring and such, you do have some uh, recent experience with that because you went out as a drum tech
Mhm.
for Project, correct?
Project, yeah, yeah, with the G.
And that was northeastern US.
Right. We started in Chicago, went up into Canada for a few dates, and then came down along sort of the northeastern seaboard, ended up in New York and then Pennsylvania and flew home.
And for those who don't know Project, tell me a bit about that and what that tour entailed.
So it's funny because Project is similar to Guild of Others in the sense that Jonathan and Rio and Mike put that together, at least from the bio that I've read about them when I started to go see them live, because Michael Sadler was on the first tour with them, and so that was put together originally so that these guys that could all get together, and it was a core too, like probably Rio and Jonathan and Mike probably, and then but other people would sort of slide in and out depending on availability, other named players, and which is exactly what Guild of Others is. The difference is Project is focusing on the original sort of classic prog music, yes, King Crimson, Jethro Tull, Kansas Rush, that sort of stuff, Pink Floyd. And they go out and they put cool medleys of some of the better known and sometimes a little bit deeper tracks together of these bands, and they play this stuff. And so it's all top notch players, Ryo Okamoto on keyboards and Jonathan Mover on drums, Mike Keneally on guitar, and so on. And so so we're similar in that sense, but I had seen them, and like I say, my introduction was through Michael Sadler because of his work on our album, and I went and saw their very first. Steve, in fact, joined me. Steve and I went and saw their very first live show in LA before they went on their first tour a few years back, and then they've come back. When they go out, they end up coming back around the Southern California area, and I've seen them every time. And then before this last outing, Rio had put out a notice that he needed a keyboard tech, and that the keyboard tech didn't really need to know a whole lot about keyboards, that he could teach him whatever he needed to know. And so I contacted him and said, hey, I'm a drummer, but I know my way around a stage, and I'm not clumsy on a stage and stuff, and I can. If you can really show me that what I need to do, and you feel comfortable, then if you don't find anyone else more qualified, give me a call.
Mm.
And he called me a couple of weeks later and we talked a bit. And he said, hey, I talked to Jonathan, and Jonathan said, but if Tom's a drummer, why isn't he helping me? I need a tech too. So I asked Rio, do you want me to work for just Jonathan, or because I offered you first, and I don't want to just walk away from that. And he goes, basically just if we end up meeting you, show up and do what you can, kind of thing. Which that's kind of what I ended up being, was like the main drum tech, but also a general crew guy as well, because I ended up like tuning mic guitars between songs and helping with other stuff, with vocalist monitor stuff and things like that. So video monitor stuff, not audio. And so yeah, so that's just how all that worked out. And I hope I didn't get lost in the response there.
No, it sounds great. It sounds great. How are the audiences on that tour?
The audience loved it because they come there knowing exactly what they're going to get. They're going to get top-notch musicians playing that early classic prog that they all love, and it's performed well. A few of the shows were in like larger clubs, and a few of them were in nice, formal theaters. The Quebec theater was really, really nice. Keswick in Pennsylvania, everyone almost plays there. And of course, the Sony Theater in New York. Bill Bruford actually came to the last two shows doing a sort of speaking engagement. So he would speak for about an hour in New York, and then Project played, and then he spoke for this, same thing, and the following night in Pennsylvania, and Project played after that. It was really nice to get to hang out with him a little bit more. I'd met him years ago, but this gave us more time to sit and talk.
Yeah, he strikes me as quite the gentleman.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right.
very much so.
Yeah. Um, Here's a question I just thought of. I'm thinking of my own experiences as a music journalist, particularly through my website. And I've covered tons of artists of different genres over the years, going on almost 12 years with the website. There's a lot of content there. Um, the biggest things, oddly enough, are anything involving the band The Misfits, the horror punk band, who I've been friends with forever. Anything involving them gets a massive response, and anything involving Prague gets a huge response.
Mhm.
And of all the music I'm sent by publicists and record labels, promotional material, 90% of it's Prague.
Mhm.
So there seems to be um, an incredibly strong fandom of Prague. And when I say Prague, it's such a wide-reaching term, but we'll say some of the classic, the stuff that the classic bands, the Yeses, the Jethro Tulls and people like that. Um, and the variations thereof, the splinter groups and all the various people who, went off and done their own thing. There's such an amazing fandom for this music. It's bigger than I think a lot of people realize. If you're an outsider unfamiliar with it, it's kind of like the Grateful Dead. Unless you go to a Grateful Dead show, you don't quite know what the cultural phenomenon is.
Right.
But with Prague, it's massive. So because you spent so much time in that world, in that genre, what is it about that style of music and that culture that has enabled it to really thrive, I think, in ways larger than most music fans would realize? I mean, the prog community is huge. Why do you think that is? What's the magic behind it that makes it succeed?
Well, it's funny. I've never been asked that question, so I can only give my opinion. I would have no real basis other than to offer an opinion. And one thing would be because with prog, you get something that you're just not going to get anywhere else. Like, where else are you going to find a 25-minute song, that has like 13 different extraordinarily contrasting pieces that wouldn't seem to fit together, but somehow do, and so you can never really get bored with prog, I don't think. So that's probably a big part of it. And of course, you're always going to have stellar players.
Mm.
You can't really get too far into the prog world without being at least a fairly competent musician. And that's not to put down any other, musicians in any other genre, because you get great players, in really basic style music as well. And, people, in fact, that bounce back and forth from basic stuff to real proggy stuff, and you realize, wow, that guy or girl is a whole lot better musician than I had any knowledge, because now I see them expressing themselves in this genre, and so but with prog, I think that would be my main guess, is because it offers something that you just aren't going to get anywhere else. It's far more adventurous and far more expressive than your average, and again, this isn't to put down any genre, but in country you know what you're going to get, and in hip hop you pretty much know what you're going to get, and all this other stuff you know what you're going to get, and but I don't know that you're going to, when you get into prog, you put on an album and you're in for a surprise usually.
Yeah, absolutely. And typically, quite a few moments of how did they do that?
Yeah. Yeah, you put the needle back on the album if that's what you're listening to. It's like, I don't need to hear that again. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Tying it around to where the conversation began when I mentioned the artwork behind you,
Mhm.
to give a greater history of that, that's one of Bill Ward's art pieces. He's done a series of art through a company called Scene 4,
Right.
based in Los Angeles. And Scene 4 is a company that works with a number of musicians to produce fine art with these musicians. The staggering amount of people come through there. Bill, did his series and did some events associated with that. Scene 4 published a book for Bill, of his art and poetry. That's how you and I again met, Tom, out in Los Angeles. Um, and I love the guys at Scene 4. Corey and Ravi are just wonderful people. I love the whole concept they've built around Scene 4. But you're a regular presence. I'd met you at that event for Bill, and then on the Scene 4 social media, I've seen you come up quite a bit because you're a regular collector of the art that's produced. So how did you make that initial connection with Scene 4 and become so much an avid collector and enthusiast behind what they do?
Well, the piece behind me there, that I was at a concert with some friends, and before the band was going to start, I don't remember which band it was, and it was so long ago. I was, wasting time, passing time, scrolling, on my phone, probably on Facebook or something, and something popped up about Bill Ward and this art. Wow, what's this? And I looked into it and I clicked on the link and I saw some pieces and immediately thought, okay, there's some pieces, and the one behind me was one of them. And I was really struck with this one and some others. And I didn't buy this one though right away. I bought a couple others, and then I was at a showing for Bill, and Bill was there at a place called Fathom
Mm.
Gallery in LA. And this exact piece hanging on the wall now, along with another one upstairs, were the ones shown at that, among others, were the actual ones on the walls that day. And one of the reasons I chose one upstairs, because Bill had actually written some handwritten a note on that one. So it's not just like his signature at the bottom. There's this whole paragraph that he wrote on it. And so that's why I told him, I said, I don't want a copy of this, like, without that writing. I want this one if it's at all available. And Corey went and talked to the people at Fathom, and they said, okay, you can have it. When we're done with it, we'll call you and you can come pick it up. And so, yeah, that's what got me involved with them. I was always a huge Sabbath fan, and I had never met. Well, actually, I had met Bill once in '92, but not on any sort of long, sit down talk kind of basis or anything, and it didn't have anything signed by him. And now here I was going to be able to get a unique type of art that no one else was doing, and signed by Bill Ward, and so that just sort of drew me in. And then I followed Scene 4 as they started working with more and more people. And they went from drummers. Drummers are obvious because there's a lot of movement. Uh, but they started doing guitar players too, like Satriani and Malmsteen and Steve Morse and Steve Lukather and a bunch of people. And so it's the same kind of philosophy there. I imagine you've seen some of that work as well. Instead of using lighted sticks, they have the lighted sort of fingertip things, and they go up and down the fret. fretboard, and you get all those squiggly lines. And I've always loved abstract art too. You know, I go to Guggenheim in New York and things like that, and they have a whole floor there dedicated to beautiful abstract art. So this stuff hit two strong categories in my life: abstract art and music. And of course, since I've been writing for newspapers, I don't anymore, but had been for years. I've been collecting a lot of signed stuff. You know, I go to this show, take photographs. The next time the band comes around, I take some of my favorite photographs that I took, take them backstage, and get the guys to sign them. And so I've been collecting signed stuff for many, many years. And this was another avenue into that realm as well.
Absolutely. And a very unique avenue because
Yeah.
what I love about the Scene 4 concept is they're bringing the world of fine art into the music community.
Mhm.
And I have quite a few pieces here. Dave Lombardo, uh,
Nice. Yeah.
Nick Benza, rest in peace. Frankie Banali, rest in peace. Um, and Corey and Ravi have connected me with Stephen Adler when Stephen did his series, which is wonderful. That's a fantastic series. Um, yeah, it's a great concept. And how wonderful was Bill Ward? I mean, let's be
Yeah.
honest here. Um, I
He's
I
beautiful.
I
I have
haven't.
some of his old stuff, old bass pedals, bass drum pedals and stuff. And I think it was at the event that you and I met where I took the old bass drum pedals. Maybe it was after the show or after the his talk.
Mhm.
I don't know if you were still there or not, but he signed the bass drum pedals and was telling me about the history of them, about how he was, I wrote and rehearsed, recorded with those bass drum pedals. His exact words were, "You have a lot of history there."
Yeah.
I thought, wow, cool.
Yeah, he's fantastic. I mean, what an easy person to talk to. I describe Bill as not Bill Ward from the world famous Black Sabbath, but Bill, the guy from Birmingham. You know,
Yeah,
I don't think that's ever been lost on him, from my experiences. And I've known Bill for quite a while, and I do suspect this video may end up within his sights. So if that's the case, hello, Bill.
yeah,
Much love to
definitely,
you. Hope you and yours are well. Uh,
indeed.
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, like I said, that was such a nice event. And what's beautiful about things like that is it connects people who have very specific interests. Like you and I met at Bill's book reading. It's not like you met at a ball game somewhere, like we're there for a very specific purpose, and we have a lot of mutual, respect for these musicians and the art, and obviously influences what we individually do with our own stuff, So again, it's that wonderful small world connection that, it's such a joy doing these interviews because I have a fairly disparate list of people on paper, and you realize how many people know other people who you wouldn't
Right.
expect, and it's all because of this, wonderful world that we exist in called music.
Mhm. That's
Uh,
how Craig ended up on the album too, because Craig and Steve knew each other uh, from previous work together, and I didn't. It never even occurred to me to ask Craig to be on the album. And then Steve came up to me one day and said, Craig offered, to be on the album. He asked if there's any spot where there's, room for a solo. And he goes, "Would you want Craig?" And I'm, well, hell yeah, that's Craig Goldy, man. The guy shreds, and he's cool. So yeah, absolutely. And so he was kind enough to do a solo that was smoking,
mm,
and I was like, that's a phenomenal solo, but does it really fit the character of the song at its optimum? Like, is there something else that might fit even better? And that first solo would have been great to go with. And Craig was so nice. He was willing to even just, he goes, okay, well, I'll do a second one. You can just choose. And he did a second. We ended up going with the second one, but we do still have the first one on the recording. And so yeah, so it is. It's a small world. You meet someone because they know someone through someone, and that kind of stuff.
yeah, and because depending on how you meet them, like I said earlier, if you meet them in a very specific place for a specific reason, the chances are incredibly high you can skip some of that getting to know you part because you're in the same room for a reason. So some of that's already taken care of. So it makes it a lot easier to connect. I mean, look at you and I. I mean, we're 6 years into this, and that's all because we ended up at well, was it the Strand bookstore? Is that where it was?
I don't remember the name. It's like something to library or something near downtown LA.
Yeah.
I
I may
forget what
have
it was
that
called.
totally messed up, and I apologize to the Scene 4 guys for flubbing that one, but it was in downtown Los Angeles. Yeah.
They can wag their fingers at both of us because I don't remember either.
Yeah. I flew in that afternoon, went to the event, and then flew home the next day.
Mhm.
I was less than 24 hours in Los Angeles for that, but
Yeah.
definitely worth it.
Yeah, I've
Uh,
done that a few times where, like I say, the Nashville thing, how I met Michael, I'd grown up listening to Alice Cooper as the band, but I didn't see Alice Cooper as a performer until 79. So I never saw the original lineup. And when I heard they were going to get together and all, the four surviving members, even though it was in Nashville and I live in San Diego, I was like, well, I'm hopping on a plane and going out there because this is probably my only chance to ever see that lineup perform live. And so, yeah, you flew out for the Bill Ward thing and I flew out for the Alice Cooper thing. And those of us, if we are able and the opportunity presents itself, we will do our best to make use of it.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And again, you don't know when you get on the plane what's going to happen, who you're
Right.
going to meet, and you could end up, I met Corey, for example, from Scene 4 in Annapolis, Maryland, at a Bill showing many
Yeah.
years ago. And, we've done things together ever since, so we're going on a good 10 years there.
Mhm.
Um, so again, it's always a joy to encounter somebody who there's a connection, a kinship with, and I certainly felt it when I met you that night in LA. And I'm just so delighted that we were able to connect for this. As we wrap up, is there anything regarding Guild of Others that you'd like to mention? Any shout outs or anything at all you'd like to throw out there as we wrap things up?
Well, certainly, a big thank you to everyone who participated on the first album. It wouldn't have been, what it was without all of them. And we're going to have some of them back on the next album, and we'll have some new players, as the name is, Guild of Others. We'll have some other players on the next album. This next album, though, has taken much longer to finish than we wanted for various reasons. And like when I was out on tour with Project, I ended up busting my wrist. So we were supposed to have already recorded these last 6 songs the beginning of this month, a few days ago. So now we had to push things back, and my wrist is better. I've been rehearsing,
Mm.
but it's a slow process, and so we'll have some more people on that album. Like I said, there's two 25-minute songs that'll reach more of the prog-minded people, but we focus on the accessibility, as you mentioned. There's still going to be some more straight ahead, regular, kind of just good hard rock driving songs. And even in the long songs, those are very riff oriented songs. So it's not like, they're just these, otherworldly kind of bizarre arrangements and stuff. There's continuity and accessibility even in a 25-minute song.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Um, if you don't mind my asking, I can always cut it out if I need to. Um, your wrist, was it injured in the course of doing the work on tour, or was it a separate incident while on the road?
So we were loading out of Montreal, yeah, and it was raining like crazy that night, and I just the big trailer that with all the gear in, the back door comes down and it's the ramp,
Mhm.
and so some other people were helping rolling up, some of the big cases, and I sort of hopped to the left to get out of the way because it was raining, so we wanted to get all the gear from the door into the trailer as fast as possible, and I just wasn't careful enough, and as I hopped, my foot caught this cable, and I went just head first down onto the sidewalk, and put my arm out to brace myself, and I didn't even know it was busted. It hurt like hell, but I could still move my fingers, and I thought, okay, it's probably a heavy duty sprain. I finished that night, and we drove on and we finished the tour, and I got home, and the day and I got home, a buddy said, you should probably have an X-rays done. You might have, you're a drummer. You might have caused more damage than you know, and it's better to be cautious.
Hmm.
And so a day or two later went and got X-rays, and they're like, "Yeah, you have a busted wrist." So that's that.
Well, I'm glad it's on the mend
Yeah, thank you. I am too.
and you're getting back to it.
Mm.
Again, viewer, check out the album that's currently available by Guild of Others. Keep an eye out for the one that's to come in the future. Again, there'll be a link for additional information as well as how to purchase the record. Highly recommended. Can't suggest it enough. And Tom, I cannot thank you enough for being part of my podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I really enjoyed it. It's nice to connect again.
Absolutely. And when the album comes out, we'll do something again.
Yep, I'll make sure you know about it.
Fantastic. Thanks again.
Thanks. Bye bye.